What's going on, Imperials? It's Emperor Cubone here. So we've reached that time every Pokemon fan looks forward to, that being the introduction of a brand new generation, where we get a crop of new Pokemon and a huge area for exploration. And that's all great, looking to the future of the franchise. However, I would like to take a look back just a bit at the generation we're leaving, of course being Gen 8. It seems like just yesterday we were watching the trailers for Sword and Shield's announcement, but it's safe to say that Generation 8 of Pokemon is a bit more controversial than most. I mean, it's not like all of the others were spotless, but it seems that right from the start the Galar games were plagued with critiques from all sides, even before they came out. I'm not even saying those complaints were unwarranted, since the graphics were a bit below where we might expect a home console to be, looking like they just ported over all of the 3DS assets. And yeah, the lack of every Pokemon being included makes it feel a bit weird, since every other game they've ever made can do it no problem, but somehow the heftier hardware can't cut it. I know that people say you couldn't expect them to do it forever, which, yeah, I kinda could, but even so, you're going to inevitably leave out somebody's favorite, meaning that you're gonna tick off at least half of the fanbase. And again, that was all before launch day. Once the games actually came out, they were alright, I guess. People did enjoy the change of the wild area, that was a totally new thing for Pokemon, but then some people had even bigger problems with the graphics. That's not everything to me, but it does impact the generation as a whole. I more fall into the camp of not loving how linear the games are. You just have to go up from the bottom of the map with no variation possible on very few routes, making this region that seems to be full of mountains feel so much smaller. And then there are the other weird cost-cutting features, like only specific overworld encounters being available, and of course none of those being able to be shiny at all, or not showing you the randomly Dynamaxing Pokemon in the story for Leon to fight. But oh yeah, speaking of, Dynamaxing was a weird gimmick for this generation. It was pretty universally met with dislike, or at least indifference, as pretty much everyone said that it was at best a combination of the last two gimmicks of Z-moves and Megas, since only certain Pokemon could get new special forms and extra powerful moves, even though at least this time every Pokemon could do the base Dynamaxing. And doing raids with friends was a great idea, but I'm not sure how well it tied into the overall regional themes, since you really only do Dynamaxing in voluntary raids, rarely showing up in the main story outside of gyms. And then things go a little bit back and forth, since they kind of copied the fake-out evil team of just last generation, but then instead of an Elite Four, we got to do a tournament thing like the anime. So some of the things were awesome, and some were fairly disappointing. I think generally lackluster with enjoyable moments might be one of the most apt descriptions of Sword and Shield. But that's not where the Galar games ended. See, for the first time in Pokemon history, they decided to expand the base games with DLC. And by expand, I mean patch in a bunch of quality of life features that should have been in the game at launch. Seriously, you expect me to believe they didn't have the Gigantamax forms for the Galar starters in development before the Isle of Armor, let alone a way to switch a Pokemon you already caught into doing it, and vice versa? Pokemon following you was that hard in the base game, so it took 6 extra months to shake it out for the DLC? They got it in Let's Go, and sure, Let's Go had a limited roster, but again, so did these games quite famously. The all-around wild area functionality of the Isle of Armor was cool with the full camera control, and adding in a bunch more of the older Pokemon that were cut was a nice touch, but I'm just torn on this aspect. I know many fans who preferred this method, saying it's better than paying $60 for a brand new game like with Crystal or even Ultra Sun. And I guess that is true, it's easier on the pocketbook, but that's also ignoring many other factors, the first of which being nobody was forcing you to buy every game in the first place, but more importantly, these later games often fixed a lot of things that were off in the first versions. Many people claim that Platinum is leagues above Diamond and Pearl with all that they changed, but this way you might spend less money, but the base game remains untouched. They never fixed any issues or complaints that arose, merely stapling on a mini-adventure to the side. So whenever you go back to the main game, you're just reminded of how much missed potential there was. But that being said, I did think the Crown Tundra half of the DLC was worth it, adding in many extra stories that tied in with a bunch of the legendaries in an entertaining and satisfying manner. So if regular Sword and Shield controlled like that, and this was just extra story content, that's the kind of quality that I would be looking for in a home console Pokemon game. However, those weren't all the generation had to offer, because we finally got those Sinnoh remakes that we've been talking about since 2015, and it's just what everybody wanted. Kind of, not really. See, Brilliant Diamond and Shining Pearl were faithful recreations of the original Diamond and Pearl games from years ago. And while the same could be said for, say, Let's Go Pikachu and Eevee on the Switch, most fans were looking forward to the Sinnoh region in the style of the Sword and Shield graphics, even though they complained ad nauseum and said that those looked terrible anyway. And we kind of got that in the battling half of the game, but the overworld is exactly the same as the DS games, just with modern day texturing, I guess. So the art style definitely made these controversial as well. However, I don't think that should be the end of the story. I mean, it was developed by an outside studio, a first for a mainline Pokemon game, so I would cut them a little slack there. I also don't think that it's fair to say that these games are exactly the same. These Gen 4 remakes do have Pokemon following you, a feature that everybody loves and could charitably be called present in the original. And this is the first time that we could ever experience the Sinnoh region with the Fairy type, so that could make a huge difference if you choose to utilize it. Not to mention the new areas of the vast underground that afforded you opportunities to catch different kinds of Pokemon that couldn't be found anywhere else, or much earlier than usual. I'm not gonna say that they're the best games ever made, but numerous people commented on videos leading up to their release, saying that they had missed Sinnoh the first time around and were excited to try it out. Now, you might cringe to think that this is how people were introduced to Sinnoh, but I'm happy that people were able to partake in one of my favorite regions, even if it is a bit uncanny. But of course, the blow of these questionable games was softened considerably by the simultaneous announcement of Pokemon Legends Arceus. If the Sinnoh remakes were too faithful, this was the opposite, being so far removed from anything that Pokemon had tried in their lives. A Pokemon game set so far in the past from anything that we've seen, changing the battle system to have fast or strong variations, while also changing the catching system to allow you to actually aim your Pokeballs in real time, meaning that if you had the skills you could avoid a fight before it starts, not to mention the fact that Pokemon actually attack you. If everyone collectively scratched their heads and groaned for Brilliant Diamond and Shining Pearl, Legends Arceus was a collective shout of jubilation. It didn't hurt that the game was so fun to get sucked into. Once again, there were detractors based on the looks alone, with there of course being some merit to that with weird texturing and just blocked off voids, but I'm not sure that many people cared. Even if some of the edges were rough, the simple fact that decades-long grievances were being addressed, such as Pokemon actually moving to their target to attack, was enough for many fans to overlook such skin-deep problems as the graphics. The core gameplay was fun, and if they could nail that in their first outing at an open-world style game, there could be a bright future ahead. And we can touch on that in a minute, but I did want to zoom out a little bit more to view the extra content that this generation gave us, because I think it's some of the best that we've seen in years. Now, both versions of Pokken Tournament were Gen 7 really, but Gen 8 gave us Pokemon Mystery Dungeon Rescue Team DX, and aside from being way too long of a name, it's a fun time. I can't really comment on how it stacks up as a remake, nor compared to the rest of the side series, because this is the first Mystery Dungeon game that I ever bought. So it did its job and got me in on a game that I had never played before. And that would be good enough, but then we also got the new Pokemon Snap. We have been waiting decades for this, and to me, it delivered. It is so fun to just sit back and play through the relaxing journey that overflows with charm, leading to all sorts of fun interactions that you can trigger with a unique combination of skill and dumb luck. Fun for pros and beginner children alike. You may think that the original is still superior, and that's fine, but this Pokemon Snap is one of my favorite side games that Pokemon has ever made, and it just looks so gorgeous, the best that these Pokemon have ever been on screen. They also made some other ones, like Pokemon Unite, that I didn't play, but I think the great extra content outside of the mainline games really helps Gen 8 as a whole. But ultimately, it seems like all of the major parts have some sort of asterisk where you have to say, yes, Sword and Shield are the best-selling Pokemon games only behind the original Gen 1 titles, but nobody seemed to really like them. Yes, BDSP are the best-selling Pokemon remakes ever, but they still lacked the third game content that was present in all other remakes like the Delta episode. Even the good parts seem to have caveats, since Legends Arceus was riding high on the top of the world until a month into its release and they told everyone to forget about it because Gen 9 was announced. So there's no telling how much they undercut the Hisui hype and all of the potential money they left on the table. But speaking of Gen 9, I'm hoping that they can take all the best parts of Gen 8 and move it forward. The Pokemon series is too big and slow to change all at once, so it seems like we get a lot of half measures, like the overworld encounters from Let's Go being worse in Galar, and then only in the underground for Sinnoh, but finally becoming all-inclusive once again for Legends Arceus. So I think that we can expect to see some more of these trends continue. I believe that we've already seen crafting return in some form, so that is encouraging to know that they were indeed listening to the feedback. So then maybe that's what Gen 8 will be remembered for? The place where some great ideas got started, like open world, camera control, crafting, aiming Pokeballs, and many more? That's probably not the case, but that's about the best that Gen 8 can hope for. Since when we talked about this last time, Gen 7 seemed more appreciated, at least with the initial Sun and Moon. Here you have a pair of mediocre to bad games in Sword and Shield, some half-hearted DLC to smooth over their mistakes, a one-for-one recreation of a game that we already played years ago, and then one new creative game that actually took risks. That's at least the wider view on it. I don't think it's quite that bad. Personally, I would put Sword and Shield near the bottom as far as debut games for a generation, and I would have much preferred a new game to improve the base Galar experience, but then I actually did enjoy Brilliant Diamond and Shining Pearl. Maybe not as much as the Gen 4 games from a long time ago, but a remake of one of my favorite Pokemon games ever can only be so bad. So to me, I would call them medium at the very least. And as I said, Pokemon Legends Arceus, as well as Mystery Dungeon and Pokemon Snap and other side materials are all huge positives in my eyes for this generation. So if we're looking for a final grade on this time period as a whole, I definitely can't say that it's a failure. It's also difficult to nail down in a vacuum since it's not like I've given all the other generations a letter grade, although I did rank them once, but taking in all the good and the bad, if I had to pinpoint it, I would say that Gen 8 to me would earn maybe a B score, maybe even a B- on a bad day. But I think it might also be more than the sum of its parts, which could set it above other higher grades? Who knows, but I do hope that Gen 9 will build upon the best parts that Gen 8 has dabbled in, and truly culminate in something spectacular, since I was very excited for it when it was first announced. But as far as how Gen 8 will be remembered by the fanbase at large, I'm afraid the majority will not view it favorably. And at the very best, maybe we could say that this was a transition time for the franchise. Will you look back on Generation 8 with pride or contempt? Is it your favorite generation of all time, or did it make you leave the Pokemon series completely? Let me know down in the comments. Also be sure to leave a like, share this video, and subscribe so that you too can become an Imperial today. And until next time, stay grounded.